Okay,
That's
so
right.
welcome everyone to I Road Leaders, How to Work with Complicated People. Now, this webinar is designed to be an interactive event. So in the chat, or actually because our room is very small right now, we'll go around the room and introduce each other. Right, we'll introduce ourselves. Sorry about that. First of all, I'm Sterling Martin. I'm with High Road Leaders, and we're very proud to be bringing this to you, knowing that this webinar is just an outline to an upcoming mastermind that we have that's going to dig deep into how to work with complicated people. So next on my list, I see Janet. Janet, introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm from Janet James Growth Leadership, and I'm also with Harold Leaders. Happy to be in this space.
And then we've got Julie.
Thanks. My name is Julie Crawford, and I am, along with Sterling, founded High Road Leaders, and we're very happy to bring to you a monthly webinar to just help grow yourself and your team and your people.
So we've got here the how to work with complicated people. And, I am quite sure that if you're sitting around a table of coworkers, each of us is going to find someone who might be complicated. So we're going to start off, and again, we're just going to touch on what this whole mastermind is going to be about. Because it's going to take a long time to actually get through to look at the complicated people, what makes them complicated, actually, I'm going to stop right there because there's some kind of surprises that can come up as we go through this. And I don't want to give them away right now, and I want you to join our mastermind. So the first question that we have, and you can put it in the chat or with the small group here, we can speak up. What is your definition of a complicated person? So Janet, we'll start with you.
I would say that I don't know if there's a definition per se, is a personality matching a different personality is sometimes complicated. So therefore, in a way, we're all complicated based on where we are, what we're doing, and who we are or who is standing in front of us.
Good. Now we've got, I see Loveland has joined us. Welcome, Loveland. We've started here, and what we're going to, I'm going to pick on you next because you just showed up. Welcome. So what is your definition of a complicated person?
Someone who's not like me.
I love your answer because that's exactly what I was thinking. Because when you stand back and you look at it and you go, oh, they're complicated. Are they complicated or are they just different from you? And that's the complication. So Julie, your thoughts on what is your definition of a complicated person?
Well, I guess because I see myself as complicated, I see everybody else as far more simple. But because I'm so complicated, that's why everybody else seems to have a way more simple life than what I do. So I think I'm the complicated person. But I think in reality, maybe we are all complicated and it's that interaction. And my perception that it's easier for somebody else is just that, right? It's only a perception.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point in the conversation is that probably a lot of the time what we think is complicated is a perception. And that's what makes it difficult, is that it's a perception of what we believe, what we don't. And we're going to get into this deeper. When we look at the mastermind coming up, we're going to look at that a lot deeper. Like, what is your definition of a complicated person? We're going to look at it and actually break it down to different things because now, from what we've talked about here, we see that what we look at as complicated is different from us. And that one's really simple. But not everyone is different from us that is complicated. And so again, in the mastermind, we are going to break it down a little bit more to look at what are those key things that kind of set you off to say, I don't want to deal with that person, or that create that issue. And again, so that's why we want, we have this webinar going on now, but this is why we want people to join the mastermind because the goal of learning on how to deal with a complicated person helps us, in our life. And the one thing about it, and the one kind of caveat I'm going to give to this book, and when you read the book, is it talks about in business. It talks about your work environment and business environment. Complicated people are in every section of our life, in our family, in our community. And so our goal, High Road Leaders' goal in this is to take the idea of the complicated person, I just did air quotes, won't do that often, but to take that complicated person and see that they exist everywhere, all parts of our life, and then to make us better at how to deal not just in the work, but in all environments. So, and for anyone who would be watching this being recorded, with Julie, Janet, and Loveland here, this is a great team that I work with, and we've discussed this over and over again. So if it seems like we're coming up with answers just like that, this has been a discussion that's gone on and on and on in the whole variety of things that we do with High Road Leaders. So then the next, so we're going to take a moment and just think about this as we go through and as we look at this webinar. Who is the person you need this webinar for? Or who would you like to see come to the mastermind other than yourself? Like when you're sitting at the table, who do you point at and say, well, okay, don't point, that's wrong. But who do you look at and say, they're complicated? Now, you don't have to use names, but tell me, what do you see that says that makes them complicated?
And I'm going to come from a business side for this because I believe that everybody needs to attend the seminar. The reason why I say that is there is different relationships in work. Some form friendships, some don't form friendships, but there's also the understanding of respect. And when that line is crossed, that's when somebody needs to be in this webinar. The other thing that I also look at is the healthcare industry, the retail industry, the spa industry. I believe that everybody should attend this because it gives you so much insight into, number one, why would this resonate with me? But you wouldn't know until you actually came. But even with what you've been discussing so far, it's important to understand that our lives have changed based on the environment that we live in. So therefore, how do you work with complicated people? And the only way to figure that out is to attend the webinar.
You've said so many wonderful things there, and you're absolutely right. We see this in all aspects of our life, and I think one of the big epiphanies we'd all get from attending this, being part of the mastermind, is to learn that, what's the common denominator in all complicated issues? Me. So for, I'm Carol, welcome. I hope you can hear us well. We're just discussing, like right now, going through the complicated people, define someone you think should, like, that you'd point out, but without pointing, that you would look at as a complicated person that would really do well being part of this. Like, how do you define them, or what do you see in them? Not sure if Carol can hear us, but Loveland, haven't heard from you on this one.
Yeah, I totally agree with Janet's position. Like, as in anyone who interacts with anyone needs it, and we all need people. We are constantly interacting with family, friends, co-workers, so pretty much anyone. But to me, who is the person you need this webinar for? I often think of people who are complicated as who complain a lot. In other words, anything that is that I'm good at, and if someone else is not good at, then I consider them as complicated because it comes naturally for me, and that's not their gifting, and so. I think that's how I see it. But to answer, I totally agree with Janet. Anyone who interacts with anyone, we all come across people and we need it. I think I'm here because I need it. I want to work with people and not feel the heaviness of it at times. So that's why I'm here.
Actually, you brought up a really interesting point. Again, and it's really one I think we all need to reflect on. You said something, you said how you said it was what I'm good at. And we're trying to figure out why the other person isn't good at it, because to me, it comes like that. And it's so simple and easy. And, I think at times what we forget, and again, this is going to go into greater discussion during the mastermind, is that what what you've learned is, you've done over years and you've grown, you've developed, you've, failed, fallen down, picked yourself back up, and then move forward. And I can say that about many of the things I do. And yet, why do we have this expectation that other people can just pick it up? And I think we forget about the path we've been on to get to where we're at. Because then that opens up the whole next or whole other question, is that what path have they been on? And again, this is where further discussion is going to come. We could take this webinar and take it, 10 hours just in discussing some of this stuff. So Carol, are you able to hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Sorry, I had dogs barking. I had to run and go see who was here, and nobody was here. So, so I just got my exercise up and down the stairs.
Well, that's a complicated event. So what we're just asking right now is that, like, who would you look at that would need this webinar other than yourself? Like we'll always say ourselves because we say that we're complicated, which is very true. But just if you're looking at the group of people you deal with, what are characteristics you see?
I mean, the characteristics are pretty broad because it's really anybody that has to deal with other people. It could be medical, like hospitals. It can be in banks. It can be in any type of sales, any type of sales business. They're going to come across difficult people, right? Or complicated people. So it really, it encompasses pretty much everybody unless someone is and even when I was just gonna say, even if someone's sitting in an office and maybe they're the bookkeeper and they don't really deal with anybody, but then it may not be their work environment, it may be their home environment. It may be they're within their community. So I think at any point in anyone's life, they're going to come across someone who is complicated and they're going to really need the benefits of how do I work with that person or how do I deal with that person. So, when I'm looking at my sort of realm, it's pretty much anyone I deal with, Sterling, it can use this. Anyone, like they all deal with people within their environments where they're working and or even I'm thinking Kiwanis, for example. I'm on the board and that with Kiwanis in the chamber, and we have difficult people. We definitely have complicated people. So in any realm, I really could see that it would be advantageous.
And if I can just add to, what
Absolutely.
Carol just shared, if I can add to what Carol just shared, when you look at, Sterling, you mentioned, obviously we say ourselves, but the connotation to that to me would be, even though we may recognize that we are complicated, do we understand why we are complicated? And, taking the webinar really gives you insights into how are you contributing to being a complicated person, or how are you growing from being a complicated person?
Janet, you bring up something there, and it's going to get into our next slide, next discussion. So it's a good segue into it. Before we get there, Julie, you haven't, what are your comments? And, other than me, because I partner with Julie, don't put, her fingers under the table pointing, and I am a complicated person, but okay, Julie, what do you look at as characteristics of the complicated person and how you view them, characteristics of them?
I mean, I see a lot of complicated people in my life. I gave birth to many of them, but some of it is we have a complicated, there are circumstances that make our life complicated, right? So that when you add all these people in and then complicated situations and stuff, it is just, it's a mess. And that sometimes I think, and why I think that this webinar is good and even the masterclass we have coming up is because it breaks it down to how do I relate to this person? And let's put away some of the mess of the situation, but let's figure out how to work with a person and that person matters no matter how complicated they are.
You
I
know,
think
it's
it
go ahead.
I'm sorry, Sterling.
Oh, no, no.
I think when we look at this as well, and we think about people as being complicated, it really focuses me to DISC as well. And, knowing the different personality styles and, where a D person might look at me as an S and go, oh my gosh, they're so complicated. Why can't they just be bullet points, right? Let's just get this done. So I think, when we're looking at that whole realm again, it encompasses the DISC aspect to it as well.
And you're absolutely, and that's why with the mastermind, we are going to include DISC and the 6 working geniuses. Because without understanding your communication style and communication styles of others, we create a complexity right there by just living within our own communication world. So that is really, really an important point. So going on next here. So here's a couple questions for us to talk about and consider. It says, do your expectations and those of the complicated person align? Now, the reason I brought this up is my best friend runs a company, and they're having some complications with some of their senior staff. And the one question I've asked over and over again, if you were to write the job description of this senior staff and he or she was to write that job description, would they align? So what I know about my job and what they know about their job, are they the same thing? Do you see that in life?
Mm-hmm.
Where do we see it in life?
Absolutely.
I see it in life with my husband, I'll be honest. And not that he's complicated in any way, but it's just the expectations of the other person. Sometimes we're not on the same page, right? So and it not just my husband, my four children, anyone that I work closely with, we have to do, I think it's very important that we have to take time to slow down, reflect, and align again. So meaning asking the questions of, what are the expectations? What are we expecting from X, Y, or Z, or whatever the scenario is, and really making sure that we're aligned. So I think it's important to have those check-ins, even if you've been, for myself and my husband, it's 35 years we've been together, right? But there's still times when we go, wait a minute, I don't think we're on the same page here. So really taking that time. So it's all around us, Sterling. It's in our family, immediate family, anyone that you work closely with, for sure.
That is so true. Anyone else want to comment on this? Because as you know, I can talk for a long time on a lot of things. So this floor is open for others to comment on expectations and alignment.
So I do believe I'm going to go from a family perspective that if you don't share those expectations, first of all, how can you be aligned? So making sure that you agree on the expectations, and I have boys, so I have to make sure that I'm very clear on what my expectations are. And it could be a simple little thing like they don't live here anymore, but when they do visit, it's the same thing. Like, okay, don't leave your clothes on the floor or anything like that. But the second part is, do your values align? No, unless we have the conversations first, unless we understand where each person's view is coming from, then I believe that our values do align, and our values can be based on just everyday expectations in a house of respect. And then, of course, in the business world, I mean, I left a company because my values didn't align with theirs. So there are very different circumstances that will, or will align with these questions that you're saying, or asking, sorry, Sterling, so that I think it varies, but I think my point, no. No, not when it comes to the expectations unless they're shared.
Mhm.
And I'm going to, because both Carol and Janet have talked about the male counterparts in their life, be it kids or husbands. And it's interesting, even looking at the male-female relation, like business or just friend relationships, not intimate relationships, but just friend relationships. There is a real difference in how we think, and that creates a complication. I used to work with a management team of 8 women and myself, and as funny as could be, we were in a big meeting and we're chatting away, and they're just, bantering back and forth, but we're talking work stuff. And the one looked at me and said, "Sterling, you have no idea what we're talking about, do you?" And I had to say no, because again, there's a telepathy or whatever within the women's group that they can just change subjects and they can just move forward. And guess what? Us men can't do that. And this isn't to sound bad. Like I don't want to sound like, th there's an issue. It's just that we're different people and that creates that complication. And
So
I've even,
I'm
go
going to
ahead.
challenge you a bit on that, Sterling. So, yes, I hear you with the men and the women, 100%. Our children, we have 4 daughters. So, and we can have the same scenarios coming up amongst the 4 daughters, again, because they all have such different personalities. They've lived different lives, right? They've gone through different scenarios. So we still can, I still find that, sometimes those expectations, in particular for a couple of my daughters, are falling short of what I would expect for them because of things that they've gone through. So, um, yeah, so I would challenge that, and yes, say there's definitely the difference between men and women, 100%, but I would say we see that even in a broader spectrum, because like I said, I have 4 daughters, and of my 7 grandchildren, 5 of them are girls as well. So we've got very little male dominance in our household. But yeah, we certainly do see those challenges and the expectations, right? So, and from, you were saying, like, even just Janet picking up clothes, when they're here, and I see that with one of my daughters. So it's not following, male or female, right?
And I do agree with you, Carol, because that leads to, again, when we go to the masterminds, it leads to a whole other discussion is how of our generational differences.
Hmm.
We look at, baby boomer to Gen X to millennial. And, at one time with the group and on a webinar, there's a really good discussion on generations, even how millennials divide up, um, divide up into megalennials and millennials. And so when we look at the different generations, I think that's also important. So,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
so the next question, though, that it talks about there, and as for those who are watching this webinar at a later time, all of us here are part of Maxwell Leadership, and so we talk about values, and values is such an important thing that we look at. And again, going to the mastermind coming up, is that we have to look at values and do our values align. And it's interesting that we've all run values exercises with different groups, and we'll do this part of the mastermind as well. And in that, when you see the differences in values between people that you thought you knew, and that's something that's important. So, from the group here, like where have you seen a difference in values that where you kind of went, oh, that surprises me?
Hmm.
think for me, coming from India, being raised there for so long and walking into the corporate culture was such a shock because it was literally night and day in terms of every value that I knew. Like we are so much family oriented. Here it's more individualistic. Just in basic things, I found it was really a shock for me for a long time. It took a long time for me to even understand what it really means. I also had a wrong perspective that Western culture is Christian culture, which is my naivete. So that was another shock for me to see that that's not true at all, at least in the corporate world that I worked in.
You know, it's so it's so interesting when we look at values and different people. And values also change as we age, as we age. That's a really bad word. But you know, as we get older, because we see things differently or we get different priorities in life. And when dealing with that complicated person, when dealing with that complicated person, we've got to understand their values. And we also have to respect, and I think Janet or Loveland, one of you had used the word respect earlier on here. We've got to really respect their differences and their values. And as leaders, as high road leaders here, and that's what that's who we are and what we do, you know, it's important that we look at the big picture because that's going to make a difference between complicated and uncomplicated. And like I said, in the mastermind, we're actually going to dig into values a little deeper. So now the next thing we're just going to look at quickly, and again, we're taking taking this book where we're taking a whole bunch of information from the book and from other sources too, like um, how to have difficult conversations and different things we're going to add into the actual mastermind. But now looking at 4 options to deal with complicated people. And again, this comes right from Ryan Leake's book and part of the mastermind coming up. And when you look at them, you know, just think about it for a second. How often do we take each one of those and put it into that complicated person? How often do we avoid them? How often do we try to change them? And I use that loosely. How often do we cancel them? And how often do we work at understanding them?
I'm going to say that when I was a manager in cosmetics, there was the one lady that used to come in that was horrible. We actually nicknamed her Permanent PMS. And depending on how busy we were, sometimes I would avoid them. No word of a lie. I would avoid them. I was younger, in my 20s. And, sometimes at that age, it's all about you. So therefore, and I taught my team that, which, reflection, you look at like, wow, if I knew better, would I have done better? Absolutely, yes. And we actually got to the point where we did start to understand that lady. And that taught me a lot. That taught me a lot, and it definitely made me a better leader. And I can honestly say, for me answering this question here, I'm number 4. I always try to understand people prior to forming a judgment. Because when you come from a place of judgment, they don't stand a chance.
You bring up a yeah, actually, and that's a wonderful the way you say that. In my career in healthcare and emergency services, we had a lot of complicated people that like a lot of complicated people that I worked with because it's a um, very ego-driven organization. And I had I won't, I'm going to call it a pleasure, but I had the displeasure of always being the one being sent to work with complicated people. And Janet, as you said it there, you got to walk in without any judgment. You may hear all kinds of bad stuff. And, there's so many of them when I look back in my heart, I just wanted to avoid it. I just wanted to have a partner that I could work with and deal with. And I won't use the words that the one gentleman said when I walked in to be his partner, and he was a very senior guy, but he literally he put me down, he cut me off at the legs, he said some stuff that was very derogatory as soon as he saw me, because I was a very junior young person. And it took about 2 hours of working with him at emergency scenes, and he changed his mind completely. But I tell you, it's really difficult if you don't do like you said, be non-judgmental and just go in and do your best and try to understand them. Anyone else on this, like options where you've had challenges or
I think for me, by nature, I like to change people because I'm passionate about some of the things that I believe in. So when I approach, my approach is often to change, although over a period of time, it's understanding that I focus on. But even now, if I am left on my own without that thinking cap on, I would go into the mode of changing, only on things, especially that I'm extremely passionate about, like personal growth and all those things.
I think
I
for me,
oh, go ahead, Julie.
sometimes it depends on where I am and if I think what I can do in that situation. Because sometimes it's like I just don't have the time or the energy to do anything else but avoid them, right? Like that's just and I might come back around and figure out something else to do later on, but sometimes, and I think we're all like this in the busyness of life, I can't just spend time to understand everybody or to help them change or whatever. Like sometimes let's just avoid them and then move on to something else. I don't
You
know.
bring out, but you bring out a real cool thought. And the way you said it was really cool because yes, there's sometimes in that complicated situation, we do need to, sorry, it sounds bad because we're trying to deal with complicated people, but we do need to avoid them. One, to create a situation that can cause more problems and create greater complications. And I think as a good leader, as a good person, if you understand those boundaries, knowing that you're not ready to take that step or you're not ready to spend the time on it, to be fair to them, we're better off backing off and then attacking it at another time. Everyone's got value, everyone's got purpose, everyone is important, but there are certain times that, I know if we go in and try to do something, we can take maybe not a complicated situation and make it horrible. And this is some of the bigger questions we've got to ask. And then to change them bit, okay, something I've learned over many, many years, it's really difficult to change other people.
Mhm.
It's hard to change myself. So, and then cancel them. Although in my career I've had to fire people, I've always tried to have it that they fire themselves. They do something, they act in a way they know that they haven't performed proper expectations. Because no one should be canceled. And that's a fine line that we got to walk there because sometimes we do have to move on. But we need to understand that they're still valuable people.
Yeah, and I think Sterling, I would always go first with trying to understand them, but you get to a point where you can keep giving effort, and even try to change them. And if that's not what they really want, and they just want to stay complicated, they don't want to try to um, you know um, get along with everyone and to move in the same direction, then sometimes we have to avoid them, right? So, but I think for me that would be a very last. And a cancel, yeah, I don't know about cancel. Avoid, yes, there's been times, or just times when you've been physically and emotionally not in a place to deal with them. And I think that's something we really need to look at as well, because if I'm not in the right mindset, and I've got a complicated situation coming up and I can't get in the right mindset, I will postpone it because I don't want to get in and do something or say something that I'll regret later. So really checking our mindset is important as well. And then I'll avoid them until I'm in the right place.
But we have to be honest about that. You know, when it
Mhm.
comes right down to it, we've got to be honest that there are times we just need to step back
Yeah.
and let that situation go for another time. You know, we're
But I
better
think,
off.
yeah, sorry, go ahead, Sterling. Sorry.
Well, no, I just said we're better off to be silent and you know, than say something we're going to regret.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a lesson I've learned from, I don't know, from my mom many, many years ago, right? You don't have anything good to say, shut up. Right? So you learn to just stay quiet until, you know, you have something that's going to benefit that person in some way. And one thing that I learned from another leader a long time ago was you either coach them up or you coach them out. Either way, you're going to coach them, so therefore they understand. And when you're coaching somebody out, they can sometimes realize it's time for me to leave. My values aren't aligned with you or the company, so therefore I'm going to find something else. And that is a great way to help people grow, as opposed to just canceling them, defeating them. You know, it's more humanistic, I think.
You know, I've heard people in the past talk about being fired, and then after they were fired, dismissed, whatever term we want to use. Fired sounds pretty harsh, but when they were done there, they felt better knowing that they were done because they knew there was another place they were to be. Now, again, when we talk high road leaders, when we talk this mastermind, and when we talk about what we here do as a group, it's important that, you know, as part of that professional and personal development, to understand boundaries, understand where we belong, you know, where we probably don't belong, to understand how to grow and develop ourselves. So, you know, once again, now, okay, what's the one skill for all four of these that we should all, you know, be 100% into when we look at all four of those: avoid, change, cancel, and understand? There's one skill that every leader needs, every person needs. It's one of those trick questions because it just came to my head.
I was going to say listening, but
Okay, see, it probably popped out in my thought button, but you're right. Thank you.
And I was going to say respect.
Well, and if you're listening, you're giving them respect.
Hmm.
So there's that word, you know, they run together. Okay. No, it's broken. Doesn't want to move to the next.
huh,
Well, don't you just love it when that happens?
go back again now.
Will your arrows on your keyboard work
There
to
we
move
go.
it?
Yeah.
There we got it. It just needed the right touch. I had to understand it and listen to it and respect it in order for it to happen. So now 4 questions to ask ourselves. And again, in the mastermind, these are things that we're going to look at like far deeper. You know, like the self-awareness question. What is it like to be on the other side of me? I just sent a couple texts out to someone I know, and I just sent it out just because, you know, I just wanted that information available, and they got all panicky on the other end. And so I've got to ask, what is it like to be on the other side of me? Because my intention wasn't for anyone to get panicky. It was just, you know, me clearing my mind. So
Yeah, that's a really
I
good
think the
question, Sterling. I think yeah, we really do have to do that. Sometimes we have to step back and look at it. Again, I think of my family, you know, when you know, we're dealing with things and it's, you know, the way I may have said it, the way my body might have said it, may not be what I intended. And then, of course, like you say, then that person that you were talking to, Sterling, got almost in a panic, right? And it's certainly not our intention. And so sometimes we have to step back and ask questions, ask lots of questions like, are you okay with the situation or the question that I'm asking? Is there more clarification you need? And just keep asking questions. You seem a little stressed. Is there something I can support you with? And really find out, because yes, what we think in our mind is being, concise and to the point, and going in the direction that we think. The other person could be going down a completely different road. So I think it's really important that we have to understand that the way we think and talk and react is not always conducive with how other people receive us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Looking at the ownership question, this is one that I've asked my son many times, but I've asked other people as well. When we get into a situation, what is my part to play in this? When we ask the initial question about who that complicated person is that should be part of this webinar or part of the mastermind, or again, thought bubbles come up and we had ideas. And now, because we've been through this quite a few times and talked about it, we know we're complicated as well. But what is the number of people out there that wouldn't pick themselves as that complicated person?
Sometimes people don't know what they don't know until they either hear it from someone or they do their own self-reflection and then have the ability to be able to say, wow, yeah, these 4 questions are very powerful because it really helps me to understand my thinking, but then there's a responsibility to other people as to how they come across, right? And I know in my past when I was in cosmetics, I was surprised at people saying like, "Oh my God, I'm scared of Janet," and that floored me. And at the end of the day, it was because I was one of those people that was very direct, and I always stated what my values were and what my intentions were. And I think if you can do that on a regular basis with people, but then show the soft side of yourself, then you get to understand, people get to understand you more and vice versa.
That's absolutely. Actually, Janet, you made me have a little giggle when you said that. My background is emergency services, and I've trained many, many people to do the job. And I remember, and I've had this a few times, but this one guy was 6'3". Okay, for those who don't know me, who might watch this, I'm 5'4". But I had this guy that was 6'3" and like a big boy, big, strong boy. And we did some emergency calls together. And I came in to talk to him one moment and he was crying. And I'm going, why are you crying? And he says, you intimidate me so bad. Because I know my job well, okay? Just like Janet, you knew your job well, you knew your values, you knew what needed to be done. And this big 6'3" guy was crying because I intimidated him. And I kept thinking, how does someone 5'4" and a little lighter at the time intimidate someone like that? But we don't understand. I think one of the things that make us complicated is that we don't understand what we're good at. We're good at it. And it can frighten people.
Very true.
Then the curiosity question, what is it like to be you? And I think this is an interesting question because we always look at what it's like to be me, but we have no idea what's on the other side, what's inside that person, what they face, what they don't face.
That's a really good point, Sterling, because I think, again, going back to getting to know the person, making sure that they feel heard and understood is really important, and asking questions to get there is just as important as well, because we don't know, even someone that we think we know really well, there's always ghosts in the closet. And until we know what those ghosts are, and maybe it could be even back to a childhood incident that occurred, we don't know what's lingering there and what they've been through, and even the struggles they're still having to this day. So I think it is really important to stay curious in all of our conversations, always, and to really ensure that the other person feels heard, understood, and valued. And to do that, we need to understand them.
Absolutely. And we need to take that time to understand them. And then the final question, there's a connection question, is what brings us together? And I always find this interesting. And again, being from Maxwell Leadership and going through a lot of material, the one thing that always stuck out to me is when he talks about common ground. And regardless of what our backgrounds is, there's at least 1% common ground between people. So a question for the group here: how often do we take that time to even find or try to find that 1%?
I think sometimes it's incredibly difficult to find the 1% because sometimes all you see is the things we don't agree on, right? And then there's like, again, just reality. Is it worth my time to find the 1%, or do I just move on and avoid the person, right? Like, I don't know. Like, I mean, I know that everyone has value, but at some point, and I mean, that's maybe this is where everybody is, and why this book is so important is because we do have to work with complicated people, and we do need to take the time to answer these questions and just how to do it best, right? So, great reason to read the book and to be part of our masterclass.
Janet, were you going to add something there? It looked like you were. I don't know if Janet's connecting with us or not, but it looked like she was trying to jump in there. It is interesting because it can take a lot of energy to find that 1%, but it usually takes energy in listening and watching and not speaking. Because here's the other question we've got to look at it is who's responsible to find that 1%? Is it the other person? If we're expecting the other person to do it, that's not leading. That's not being that good, strong, ethical person. But it's interesting, Julie, even how you brought that up before when we look at the four different levels of, with avoidance as the first one. At some point, do we need to back off a little bit, let our judgmental mind go, and then come back at it another time to get to that connection? These are difficult questions, and we can spend a lot of time, potentially discussing them. Again, and that's what the mastermind's all about, is to take it not from just our quick discussion here, but it's to take it to that next level where you start going, oh, that makes sense. Oh, that was me. Oh, I can do something differently. Got all these O's all over the place. So you are stuck when you stop, because that's the time you relinquish all autonomy. I put this in there because I thought this was really cool. In our lives, we all want autonomy. Even if we're working for someone else, there was an interesting saying in a book I read a long time ago. It says, people don't go to work to be managed. They go to work to be led. And when you're being led, you're empowered. And when you're being empowered, you've got autonomy. And it doesn't matter if you're a chambermaid or a CEO or any point in between. We want the autonomy to do our job. So it's just something to think about as we look at complicated people. When we stop, again, we've lost our autonomy. So now just going to, oh, and then the other thing before we start to close off here, and I think this is something that's important for all of us. You know, it says the greatest enemy of communication is the illusion of it. We talked earlier before about clarity when we talked about values and we talked about understanding roles. And that comes down to the ability to communicate. When we look at the DISC profiles that Carol brought up there before and part of the mastermind, when we look at that, it's understanding that just because I say it, it doesn't mean you get it. You know, and there's a point about how it's delivered, the white noise that's in between, how it's received, what's going through the receiver's mind at the time. And there's all these influences that can interfere with our communication.
Yeah, I have another quote. I came out with: the greatest gift you can give someone is to truly hear them. And I think that is really important. It kind of goes with this statement, Sterling, that the greatest enemy is its communication is illusion, and the fact that people walk away and go, "Oh my gosh, that was a great conversation. We had the best meeting ever," and several people are walking away feeling unheard, unvalued, not understood, and very much not part of the team or part of the group, right? So yeah, it's I could see that definitely would be the greatest enemy.
You know, how many times have you gone to see, and we've all gone to see speakers throughout our lives, you know, because that's one of the passions that as leaders that we have. And how many times have you walked out of hearing a speaker and then talking to other people that were with you, and you each got a different message from the same speaker? You pulled out that one point that you went, wow, I really, this is cool. And the other person said, did he actually say that? I got this. And so again, it's that whole illusion of communicated, how it's communicated, and what's communicated, which is important. So, and that again, as part of what High Road Leaders wants to do is a part of this mastermind, and then the future of what we want to do. It's all to remedy so many of these situations and create better hearing, better communicating, better, a stronger leadership. So as we look at the master class coming up, starting September 17th, it's going to be 9 to 10:30 Mountain Time. I was going to say Zoom time, Zoom online. And we just encourage people to come and be part of it, to join in, to do the workbook, to read the book, but to actually challenge even what we bring forward. Because the best way we learn is by being challenged. And as the team here knows, I'm not afraid of a challenge. And I'm not afraid to say, hey, you might be right. Because that's where we learn. So again, as we go forward, you join us on this master class. The topics, list of topics here, going through it. And although this is the chapters of the book and the topics, the person you need this for, good, bad, and not so bad, stop letting them surprise you. And we get lots of surprises when we're dealing with what we'd call complicated people. Same planet, different world. I just love this one because it shows that, we're in the same environment, same area, but we see things so differently. And that creates complication. Collaboration is a mindset, absolutely. The people accuse. And they talk about different Qs like EQ, IQ, and just looking at how they all relate to creating complicated or not complicated. Age is just a number until you have to work together. And that's something that's really funny because you look at it. Um, we look at the different generations of people and how they view things, how they work. I come from the environment that, if my work hours are from 9 to 5, I'm there 9 to 5, I'm doing this, that, you're seeing. And we've got a generation out there that, well, they'd rather work at 2 in the morning, do it at night, get all their work done. And it's just that different mindsets that we've got to look but we still need to work together as one cohesive unit to make the world a better place. Now you're speaking my language. The customer is not always right. And that's something that's important. We always say the customer is always right, but when you look at it, how many staff members have been abused or chewed out or just negative things have happened because the customer is right. And that's not how we value people. So that can create some interesting discussion. Don't shoot the messenger. Putting the nearly in nearly anyone. And then finally, choices that can change you even if you stay the same. Our life is all about choices. Our choice to learn about how to deal with complicated people and how we've got a choice to learn that we're complicated. So it's a 6-week masterclass for those who are going to participate. You'll get a hardcover copy of the book. It's a very, very good, very easy book to read. The DISC communication report, where you'll learn about your DISC styles. And we'll talk about that in the program, because when you understand your communication style and you understand that there might be someone out there that communicates a little differently than you and how to deal with it, and I say that a little sarcastically, we all communicate differently, but understand that there are primary groups that we can learn to deal with once we learn about ourselves and how to work with them. Working Genius is a great, great program to understand your work team, to know that some people can come up with ideas, but they cannot make them happen. We need the rest of the team to develop that. Or some people can just make the team flow, but they couldn't have an idea if they're, if you said, write down all your ideas, they have a blank page. They're all part of the team, and all 6 different working geniuses are needed to complete a project properly. And then there's a workbook that's going to come with it, where on your time, you will fill it out and we'll discuss it. We'll go through it. And it's all part of that learning process. So to register today, for those who are going to take part in it, there's a $40 off if you attend the webinar. Early bird is $249 and the regular price is $299. And you can connect with that at ComplicatedPeople.ca. And please feel free to reach out to High Road leaders at any time that you wish to get more information, discover about how to deal with complicated people, or a variety of other things that the team that you see on the screen can bring to you. Because it's a great group of people, lots of experience that are there to help develop not only yourself, but your teams and move forward.
Well, thanks for
So,
today's webinar. Thanks everybody for coming, and we will see you at another time. I will get the recording of this out to all the attendees, as well as the 15 people that registered that are not here. So anyway, we'll see you all at another time.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.